It's a really solemn occasion here.
Yeah.
And we're going to try and cover it from all angles
It's
about
really,
what's happening.
It's really a worst case scenario, all out assault on Ukraine, land, air, sea, cyber, truly just a shock and awe effort from the Russians. And we are going to cover it from every angle. We're going to talk about what is happening this morning. Obviously, the news breaking very quickly, so we're bringing you the very latest that we can.
That's right.
Always with the knowledge that, especially in war reporting, things can change. Reports can be debunked later on, so doing our best to sort through all of that. We'll talk about what the expectation is from Biden and European leaders, how Republicans, including Trump, are reacting, what the markets are doing, how the public is likely to be impacted, and a little bit of a look back and a bigger picture about how we got to this place. The one part of the show that is not going to be about Ukraine is my monologue, because obviously it was written before all of this happened, but maybe it'll be nice to have some fare on a different note. But Saagar, let's start with the very latest that we know this morning.
Let's go with the latest. So last night, early morning, Ukraine time, around 5 in the morning, Russians began invading the country from all different areas, by air, by land, and by sea. There's heavy fighting all across the entire country. It is not limited to the eastern republics. Putin gave a speech saying that they're going to be conducting operations to clear Ukraine of Nazis. That's the justification that they're giving. The president put out a statement late last night speaking with President Zelensky. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. This is the immediate reaction there from the White House, that the prayers of the entire world are with the people of Ukraine. He calls the attack unprovoked and unjustified by Russian military forces. President Putin has put a premeditated war that will bring catastrophic loss of life and human suffering. Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction that this attack will bring. The United States, its allies and partners will respond in a united and a decisive way, and the world will hold Russia accountable, teasing there a massive sanctions package to be hit on the Russian economy, basically a full-scale decoupling there of the Russian banking system from our own banking system, previewed also by the European Union this morning while they were reacting to this news basically in real time. The United Kingdom and the EU announcing a similar sanctions package. The G7 is going to be meeting sometime later today, including President Biden, with all of the different major leaders of the country. There was some late night breaking stuff happening, almost a scene from a movie. The Ukrainian ambassador speaking at the United Nations Security Council, decrying a potential Russian invasion, handed a note, Krystal, informing him that his country was beginning to be invaded while he was speaking in New York. You almost can't make this stuff up. But at the top, I think we have to say a couple of things. I never expected a full-scale invasion like this to happen. I was deeply distrustful of U.S. military intelligence, and frankly, I think I got it wrong in terms of what happened here. I never expected Putin and Russia, in order to do something so frankly, colossally foolish. He has fulfilled the dreams of the neocons now in Washington for all time. He is basically ensured now, Krystal, as we'll be discussing throughout the entire show, a full-scale NATO deployment to the eastern flank. This is the greatest thing that could have ever happened to the U.S. defense budget. I mean, there will now be renewed justified calls. Already I'm seeing this morning the German former defense minister and others saying they're going to be re-upping their armaments. So we are looking at a whole new era of geopolitics here. And
indeed.
It is entirely Putin's fault.
And China sort of tacitly aligning with Russia.
Yep, that's right.
Basically calling for, lessening of hostilities all around. So this very, wishy-washy, both sides kind of a statement, when clearly 100% the aggressor here is Putin and is Russia. The moment when I started to think, this is about more than just NATO, and this could be what the intelligence community is telling us, is when he gave that long speech.
That's right.
And I know you're talking about that more
I'm really
in the monologue.
Into the history of it.
Because there were pieces of it that were the sort of realist case of the Russian security interests, concerns about NATO expansion eastward, concerns about Ukraine, and even the possibility in the future of Ukraine being part of NATO. But a lot of the speech was a nationalist speech about a sort of return to Russian glory, Russian Empire, Russian imperialism asserting itself on the global stage. And so when we saw that seemed to me like a real turning point and indication that there was a lot more going on here than just those sort of realist interests. And that's the only way I can wrap my head around what's been done here, is that nationalism is a hell of a drug, because there is no doubt, obviously, this is horrific for the people of Ukraine. People all around the world are going to suffer in certain ways, but the Russian people are going to suffer greatly as well. And we'll get more to, what the specific Western response is likely to be and how far they could go and what that would ultimately look like. But let's talk about some of the specifics of this invasion, because this went, as you said, far beyond just these eastern separatist territories. The original question was, okay, are they going to try to reclaim the entire Luhansk and Donetsk regions? Well, those battles are happening now. They're clearly trying to regain the entirety of those territories. But you have fighting and explosions happening all over the country, and an effort to take out airports in if not every major city, pretty darn close. And so we have a little bit of video just to give you a sense of what was happening last night as this was all occurring. This happened live on CNN, one of their reporters having to stop his reporting from Kyiv to put on his flak jacket as you hear explosions in the background. Let's take a look at that.
I think it's relatively safe at the moment. Look, I've got
there's another one.
I've got a flak jacket right here. Let me just get it on.
So Matthew Chance is live for us in Kyiv, Ukraine. Matthew, we're going to stick with you. Matthew is on a roof in central Kyiv, he's telling us, and just...
And this is a professional who's been in tough
He's actually been very good from the very beginning.
And you can see, how intense this is. And we have a map of where we have reports of fighting and shelling. This is from the New York Times, a map tracking the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And you can see there is not a region that is spared here. The one city that we don't actually have reports of shelling right now is Lviv, all the way in the eastern portion of the country. But you can see Kyiv, you can see Odessa, certainly those separatist regions with a lot of Russian speakers. So we have reports of sea invasions. We have reports of shelling from the air. We have reports of cyber attack. We have reports of, I've even seen image of, Russians parachuting in, also invasions, along with there's reports that Belarus has contributed troops.
They've helped them,
denying it, but there's credible reports that Belarus has helped them and has also supplied troops. And as of now, it does not look like the Ukrainian military is faring particularly well. Zelensky actually, not only has he introduced martial law, he's also said they are issuing firearms to everyone who is of fighting age, expecting these battles to come to town squares. You have that language?
Yeah, I can read it here from President Zelensky this morning. We will give weapons to anyone who wants to defend the country. Be ready to support Ukraine in the squares of our cities. Promising there, also last night, you will not see our backs, you will see our faces. So they're standing tall, well, as tall as they can. But we have to be honest here about the overwhelming power that Russia has brought to bear. I pulled a video I found this morning. This is from 15 miles just outside the ring road of the city of Kiev on a key strategic airport. For those who are just listening, bear with us. It's only about 10 seconds. But for those who are watching, this is a full-scale helicopter attack on this airport. Let's take a listen.
Уже штук 20 пролетіло. Не видно українського герба. Точно російські. Прямо над хатами. Прямо ось над хатами літають, падли. Полетіли в сторону аеропорта, бомблять аеропорт. Чути, що йде бій. Вже штук 30 нарахував точно.
And now, Krystal, we see that air bases have been hit across the country. There was even a dogfight. These are things that have not happened in the history of warfare since like the 1970s. It's unbelievable to see these scenes. And this is what it comes down to, and why I never thought Putin would be as big of a fool in order to do something like this. He is now a pariah state in the eyes of the world. I mean, he has now committed something on par with the United States invasion of Iraq. I mean, there is no justification for this. Actually, can we throw out that map up there on the screen yet again? Let's just emphasize this to all of the viewing public. The Russians claim that everything was about what was happening right over there in the east, for those who are just watching. Go ahead and show me how an attack all the way up near the Belarusian border, a pincer attack on the city of Kiev, attacks on the city of Mariupol, Odessa, by the port cities, has anything to do with any of that whatsoever. So look, you heard it here on the show, the most honest take you could possibly give about any of the Western role, and we'll talk more about this in terms of NATO expansion, legitimate Russian security interests, threats, but it is clear that this is not about NATO. This is about restoring the former glory of the Soviet Empire. And I have to say, Krystal, that this is one of the most catastrophic moves that Russia could have made in a long time. And the reason why, you may say, oh, it'll be successful. Maybe the Ukrainians will surrender. Although I've been doing and reading a lot of history about Russian possible attacks. I'm going to talk more in my monologue. They have underestimated Finland in 1939. They're like, oh, they'll be greatest as liberators. It'll all be fine. They had a catastrophic military disaster. I mean, you and I were texting this morning. I mean, you think the Ukrainians are proud people too. They're going to fight back. They may not win, but you will have now on your hands 44 million people who have now been forcibly taken over. And are you going to have a full-scale insurgency? Now that is on your hands.
Right.
And this is not something to trifle with. Wars always have 40th and 50th order consequences, of which can bring down the entire empire if you're not careful. And there is an incredible amount of hubris from the Russians, who are also dramatically overestimating their ability to be resilient as its own sovereign state in the 21st century economy. That's not how it works. They are going to suffer a colossal disaster. I really feel for people in Russia. They're going to suffer for this. Well, they are not going to eat properly.
Yes.
You know, I'm not saying there'll be a famine or something, but the stores are going to be completely bare. I mean, they're not going to be able to travel. Their futures are over. If you enjoyed, the time of being able to gallivant around the European Union, the Schengen, that's done too. And look, this is something that was needless. It was an unprovoked. It's a colossal disaster. It's a crime. It truly is a crime against peace, which is all anybody really should want.
We've seen video this morning, of course, of people fleeing Kyiv, and you contrast this to, I mean, the population really stayed cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah, they
through
did.
All of this.
Very calm.
I think Zelensky deserves a lot of credit for doing everything he could.
He did everything
to try to tamp down tensions. There were even reports that before this all happened, we were going to bring you of how disciplined the Ukrainian military had been, so as to avoid providing Russia with even the fig leaf of a justification for this attack. Russia didn't even take a fig leaf. They had no reason whatsoever, completely unprovoked, this war that they have started. And it's very clear, I mean, this is an attempt to realign the world order in real time, which is why watching what China does here is so significant as well, and the way that they seem to be tacitly aligning with Russia. I mean, that's Russia's one lifeline that's going to be left in the world.
And they'll buy their gas.
And it's a very significant one, because again, what is the Russian economy dependent on? It's dependent on gas. That means look, we're going to talk in a little bit about what the markets are doing and how gas prices are already spiking. Look, that's going to hit us here. That's going to hit the European continent. But the Russian economy is basically wholly dependent on gas. So if they can't sell into the world market, that's devastating for them. But China is quite a large and significant market. So that's what they're really counting on in their attempts to, reorder the world post-Cold War and move us immediately from what has been, a unipolar U.S. hegemonic situation into a kind of new global strategic situation. So listen, in terms of the foolishness of this calculations, look no further than our own experience in Afghanistan, or the Soviet experience in Afghanistan for that matter, to understand the way that invading and occupying a sovereign nation eats away at your country, damages your own national and world standing, the way it takes your resources. Because as much as we have less of a geostrategic interest in Ukraine than the Russians do, no one has more of an interest in Ukraine than the Ukrainians.
Yes.
And as you were pointing out, they have a long and fierce nationalist identity and, have been fighting for their territory for a long time and have learned a lot over the past 8 years during the Civil War also about how to fight and attack and hold ground as well. So even though, look, today Russians have come in with shock and awe, a lot of reports of significant severe damage to the Ukrainian Navy, to, any air capabilities, to their airports. There are reports of some major cities that have already been taken. These are all preliminary, so I want to put caveats on all of that. But in terms, look, remember, we came in with shock and awe too.
Yeah, we won the war in Iraq in 3 weeks, right?
And then
that's what I was told.
And then how did it go? Right. How did it, same thing in Afghanistan. We rolled in very quickly, Taliban flees. Well, guess what? That was far from the end of the story. So long-term, even, immediate term in terms of the retaliation and the economic devastation, absolute foolishness from Russia, but they decided to put, their nationalist interests and their desire to reassert themselves and to regain their sort of ego and confidence on the world stage. There's reports, kind of conflicting reports that I've seen this morning about the way the Russian public is reacting.
Yeah.
So Clint Ehrlich, who's an analyst who I've been looking to, who I think has had, a fairly accurate take of what's going on and has tried really to present the Russian side of things as well, says Russian media is emphasizing that what's happening in Ukraine is a purely military operation. Is not a purely military operation. It's a special operation, so it includes Russian intelligence, law enforcement, et cetera. But he also talks about how on Russian television, they're absolutely gleeful. Like he actually says, the mood is euphoric. I don't recall American war coverage like this, even during the Iraq invasion, which is a big statement. Yep. Or even when we were bombing Syria and Brian Williams is out there talking about the beauty of our missile strikes and all of that. He says, so much laughter, such big smiles. As someone who's tried hard to present the Russian perspective to Americans, I'm grossed out. On the other hand, there's reporting from the New York Times this morning about how some of the regular Russian population, is all fine and good when we're talking about, okay, we're recognizing the separatist regions, we're going on a quote unquote, fake peacekeeping mission there. War is another thing altogether, and that there's some unease among the Russian public about what this is going to mean for their lives. And they should be very uneasy about what this is going to look like and how it's going to reorder and completely change what was possible for them in their own lives.
Yeah, I'm going to go into it more in my monologue, but you guys should remember this. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was a colossal disaster, and actually was one of the things that undermined a huge amount of public trust in the Russian regime at the time, specifically because thousands of Russians were getting killed, and Russian media was not allowed to cover the graves, the burial ceremonies. They basically didn't allow the moms, basically the equivalent of our Gold Star moms, in order to grieve in public. There was a huge public backlash against the military campaign, and it became public knowledge that the war in Afghanistan was a complete disaster regardless of the propaganda. Look, never underestimate the Russian people's capacity for suffering. I will say that. History has taught us that very well. That being said, a foreign military adventure, the likes of this one, in which they were not invaded, and is not something that they historically have been all that okay with, and which has caused great domestic turmoil in their country. Putin has dramatically overestimated his own hand and underestimated always the 40th order consequence of war. We thought we would be greeted as liberators in Iraq. How did that work out? I mean, Stalin thought that walking through Finland would be a cakewalk. The Russians thought that the Russo-Japanese War would be fine. They thought that the Great War would go fine. Things in Russian history do not look so well on the side of Russian aggression over the last 2 centuries. And I would just say, I feel very bad for the Russian people themselves. I don't think they deserve this.
Yeah.
The Ukrainians, I mean, I cannot imagine having your country full scale taken over. I drove past the airport, Reagan National Airport this morning, and I just thought through my eyes, I can't imagine it. There's a helicopter coming down here and shooting people on the streets and making sure that's not happening. Imagine, coming here into Washington, D.C. to get arms from the U.S. military in order to repel an invasion. It's something that truly boggles the mind. This is a return to, the geopolitics of old. And again, to your point, CCTV China is running a program actually right now about how Ukraine's fate is the future of Taiwan. So there you go. They're very much looking at this as a full-scale realignment of the global order. And my greatest fear here is the escalation ladder has now, this is Putin's greatest mistake. He has reawoken a sleeping giant in Europe. I've been saying for years that the Europeans should be reigniting their defense budgets. You're going to see 4 or 5% military spending now from the German economy, from the UK. I mean, the EU and the French themselves, they are all going to rearm massively, bring military spending up. He has now created a situation where the Washington basically has no choice in order but to deploy troops into the NATO eastern flank. We are going to be almost certainly, I'm not even saying I support this, but we're going to see, no question, a bipartisan consensus on renewing the U.S. nuclear program, hypersonic missile development. I mean, he has single-handedly now created a situation where we are going to return to the Checkpoint Charlie days of East and West Berlin. This is not necessary. And now our guys are going to be sitting there eyeball to eyeball with the Russian troops on the NATO eastern flank. And all it takes, as it did in 1960, is a single snap and the entire world can end. So I can't condemn it enough. We can acknowledge the Western hubris and all that helped get us into this situation, but this is Putin's fault. I feel a deep sadness today, both for Russians, for Ukraine, for the fate of the world, and just a realization that we're in a whole new era.
Yeah.
I truly hoped we would never get here.
It really does feel like a tipping point and a sort of break point in terms of world history and what things are going to look like from here on out. And that's without even talking about what the UN says is potentially 5 million refugees
this is gonna be
flooding into the countries around Europe. We all know the type of political destabilization that can cause, the level of humanitarian aid that is going to be required.
Poland is going to be overrun now.
It's really, it's just horrifying to contemplate. You can't even really wrap your head around what all of the follow-on consequences are going to be. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.